Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description.
Well, it's another Wednesday at Carrington. The sun is shining. It's again me, Samuel Luckhurst and Tyrone Marshall. A little bit hushed at the moment, almost as if we're the 18th at Augusta. And the green's almost as manicured as immaculately as Augusta, but there's a lot of media activity here today. It's Manchester United's UEFA Media Day ahead of the Europa League final next week. At the moment, the players are doing some weight training in the distance and just limbering up ahead of their session. It's a extended session for us today. We're allowed to watch an hour of it as opposed to the usual 15 minutes. Obviously, the team news line for us was always going to be, is Lenny Orr out there? Is Matthias de Ligt out there? They're not. Aidan Heaven isn't. So I think it's safe to say that United could be without 4 centre-backs for the Europa League final. What do they do in that circumstance?
Oh, that is a good question. I mean, there's not a lot they can do, I guess, really. I mean, you would want Mazraoui, I guess, repurposed as a centre-back in that situation. Maguire is a certain starter. And then, are you looking at one from Shaw or Lindelof, maybe? I mean, Johnny Evans is out here training. I can't see Johnny Evans getting in the frame for it, to be honest, given how much football
he's not started a game since Amorim's first game in charge at Ipswich.
Right, okay, that long, yeah. I can't see, maybe he'll be on the bench, can't see him being in contention, but I think I'd probably look to play Shaw, to be honest. But obviously Mazraoui playing, you're then looking for a right wing back. I think we've made the case for Ahmad previously. Dalot did train as we were coming out here for the session. Dalot was going back in after doing an individual session with a fitness coach. I think the suggestion, there's a lot of media activity today. I think the suggestion he's doing some of it later, which would suggest maybe that he's certainly not given up hope of being fit, that United haven't given up hope on him being fit. I mean, I think he's only missed, we were working for 3 weeks, is it?
Yeah.
So there shouldn't really be an issue with match fitness there if he can get back to full training by the weekend. But, clearly it's not a good time for all these injury issues. And, I mean, we are still talking a week out from the final. So depending on there's a press conference with Ruben Amorim later, I guess, depending on what he says about Yoro or de Ligt, maybe one of them still has a chance. But given they're not here at the moment, you'd certainly have to say their doubts. And yeah, I mean, that is problematic for United, isn't it? And there's no doubt about that.
Certainly, speaking personally, if no one's playing or can't play in that game against Chelsea on Friday night, they can't start a final, the most consequential final United have had in years, next Wednesday, which we're only a week out from. I don't know whether as you said, Dalot, I think he's going to be on the bench. You've got 12 substitutes for European games, so that helps. United haven't always named 12 subs. Sometimes they've named 2 goalkeepers on their bench. Given Dalot's durability, it feels like, and the noise is coming out of the club as well. And as you said, it sounds like he's going to stop and speak today. I think there's suggestions that he wants to get a message across ahead of the final. I don't think he'd just be driving over to Old Trafford to tell us he's out, he can't play. He sounded pretty bullish as we walked past him earlier. But it does feel almost somewhat evenly poised on the injury front, because Spurs have got James Maddison out, Lucas Bergvall out. There is a genuine concern that Dejan Kulusevski as well could miss the final. Would you still put United as slight favourites for it?
I'm finding it, I'd make it maybe 50-50, to be honest. I think it's really hard to call. Kulusevski would be a big blow for Tottenham. I mean, he
scored twice against United this season.
He's an excellent player. He knits everything together. Maddison was very good for them in the first leg of that semi-final before he got injured. I think he's been in decent form of late. So, there are injuries on both sides. There are obvious issues on both sides, given where they sit in the Premier League. And I think the fact they're so unpredictable makes it really hard to call, really. You kind of look at United are Jekyll and Hyde this season, aren't they, with Europa League and Premier League? Part of me thinks, is that tactical? I wrote a piece on this yesterday, that this system is better suited to kind of the slower pace of the Europa League. It allows them to get more men forward. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see whether this is a Europa League game or a Premier League game. Now, Amorim said on Sunday that it was kind of suggested that it was to do with attitude and energy in the Premier League, and if the players can't really get up for it. If it's more tactical, then it's going to be interesting to see if if the issues they've had in so many of these Premier League games resurface against Tottenham, or if it is just in how they're approaching it, they should win it. But if it's kind of a tactical issue against Premier League teams and in Premier League games, then playing a domestic rival is probably not a good thing for them. And the fact that they've both been so bad in the Premier League and good in the Europa League, I just think makes it really hard to call. But I mean, just going back on the team news front, I mean, we're now in a position where there's probably a reasonable chance, certainly half a chance, that Lindelof and Maguire are starting a European final for United in 2025. And I think you certainly can't quibble with Harry Maguire's form recently, but it's still incredible to think that those two could still be forming a centre-half.
That has been a recurrent issue with Manchester United, full stop, for upwards of 10 years, that the squad is a mishmash. You've got players from Mourinho's era still, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's era, and with those two players, as you just said, they were paired together the first time nearly 6 years ago when Harry Maguire joined, and incredibly, Lindelof got a new contract that summer, and he has seen out the 6 years of it. And look, he has outstayed his welcome. That's not his fault. That's just the running of the club. But going back to the final, like you touched upon it as well. But my concern for United would be that they've done brilliantly at the Europa League this season in terms of managing games, comebacks, the number of goals they've scored. They have been unrecognisable from the Premier League team, but in the final, they're facing a Premier League team. Yeah. And strangely, for a team that have been in the top flight in English football for nearly 50 years, all of a sudden, it looks like they can't cope playing against fellow Premier League sides. That's obviously going to give cause for optimism for Spurs, even though Spurs haven't won a trophy since 2008. Do you think that the three games between the clubs this season, do you think they're particularly relevant? Because as I've said a couple of times now, the first game was under Ten Hag. It was an extension of last season. I think that day they probably decided once and for all he has got to go now. The League Cup game, quite a lot of rotation going on there. Altay Bayindir was in goal at one end. You had Fraser Foster, who was even worse up the other end. And then it was Lindelof being the babysitter for the, I think it was 8 players who had never played for United who were substitutes at Spurs in February. So do you still think those? Do you think those games will be relevant?
I think Tottenham will consider them relevant. To be honest, I think they'll be more relevant for Tottenham. The fact that they've had the chance to play against this team twice, and in a way, it's not so much just playing against. It doesn't matter, I guess, if some of those players change, because the system Amorim plays is the same every week. So you might be playing different players, but positionally, you still know what they're going to be instructed to do, and you still see slight tweaks within what Amorim does. With midfielders, with Garnacho's on the left, sometimes he pulls wide and the wing comes inside a bit. But generally, I think Tottenham will have a pretty good handle on the principles that Amorim wants. And I think this is what makes it interesting for me, whether this is just a case that United have been the Premier League off and are better in the Europa League, or whether this is a tactical thing. And the kind of where it falls down, this Premier League argument that they've taken their eye off the ball, they lost 5 of their 6 Premier League games in December. Their eye was very firmly on the ball then. There's no getting away from the fact Amorim's record in the Premier League is disastrous. 6 wins in 25. You look at the teams they've lost to, certainly lost to at home, like Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth, Newcastle, Brighton, West Ham, Wolves, all winning at Old Trafford in the space of 6 months. It's at that point where, and I don't think this will happen, and it's an interesting part of the narrative, really, that you look at the final next week. Both have had terrible seasons. I think Postecoglou's going to go, win or lose, and I think Amorim's going to stay, win or lose. But potentially there's an argument that shouldn't be the case, and that maybe Amorim should be under more pressure. And certainly if the final goes horribly wrong for them and these failings appear again, it's a big risk I think United are taking to go into next season.
But can they afford to make a decision based on the final? Because look what happened last year, where they did make a decision based on the final, and the outcome of it, great on the day, it was clearly to us at least anyway, it was the wrong decision, and it was detrimental in the long run. I think, as you said, Amorim will be safe. And I said a while ago that even if they got relegated, I'd have still said just back him, because the problem is clearly how they've assembled the squad, a lot of the players, the running of the club. Not so much at the moment, even though they've made huge errors, but in the recent past, and then try and have that clean break next season. But whatever happens in this final, he's going to be under huge pressure in those first 3 months next season, where you've got international breaks in September, October, and November. And of course, in October this season, we were wondering, are they going to actually pull the bullet here? Pull the trigger. They didn't. But it feels like, and in fairness to him, he's tried to get his message across as well, that this isn't going to save our season. We've got bigger problems. There was a point earlier in the season where he was almost downplaying the Europa League, because clearly he felt that the domestic form was the truest gauge of their form, which he's right in saying. And as great as it would be for them to win the trophy, I mean, they're not going to have an open-top bus parade, and nor should they, and they could finish 17th. But it still feels fascinating. And I would imagine even if they won next week, he would come in afterwards, and he would be... I think he seems quite... Although he's an emotional guy, he can be quite reined in celebration. You don't really see him going berserk. No. Maybe Lyon was the first game, and he just seems to do a little jig of delight in mid-air. How do you just look at his position at the moment?
I mean, I think his position is safe. Like I said, I don't think there's any danger that whatever happens in the final, he loses his job. But the position they're in is, and this is kind of the issue with taking over mid-season, and it's no secret he didn't want to take the job in mid-season. He's since changed his tune on it, but I guess he's got to now he's here, and he said this period's been beneficial for assessing the squad and things like that.
He went to the Arndale Centre and thought that swung it.
I'm here. Christmas in Manchester, get me over it. But the thing is, it's been so disastrous. What has happened? There's kind of, I was going to say, there's no blame attached to him. I think there's becoming more blame attached to him. But it conditions what we think of next season. So if they took the job in the summer and United lose 3 of the first 8 next season, everyone says, well, it's a settling in period, it's a bedding in period. Now, after this season, it's going to reach the summer, and I think everyone's going to say he's not had the players for the job. He's not had the time in the training sessions to get his methods across. Let's give him a chance. But if they lose 3 of the first 8 next season now, straight away, people are going to go, well, was last season a free hit? Or was that his system, his tactics, his ideas just don't work? And I think that's the position where I think it's kind of what you hinted at before in that question, that what's happened this season is now conditioning what we think of next season. And the judgments are going to come quicker, I think, next season than they would have done had he taken over in the summer. And that's kind of the issue that this run of form and this season has created for him, that if next season starts poorly, like I say, they lose 3 of the first 8, 4 of the first 12, partly it'll depend on the fixtures, obviously, but I think there's a real danger that he's under really heavy pressure early on next season.
Yeah. At the moment, the players are still limbering up in the distance. There must be about 2 dozen staff members overseeing it. Ruben Amorim's over there, obviously, with his coaching staff. I think he's just speaking to Andreas Georgeson, who's got the cap on, medical staff over there as well, overseeing things just to ensure that they're there to act in case anybody picks up a sudden injury or there's a sudden issue. There's another cameraman in the distance who must be one of the clubs. I mean, they're still too far away for us to make out, I think, who is who. I suppose in terms of just going back to the team news front, it's the only ones who've returned from injury are Johnny Evans and Toby Collier, and let's face it, that they'll do well to be on the bench next week, and they probably will just through their availability. It seems like that the players will be coming a little bit closer. The balls and the cones are all laid out. The training dummies as well. I think I've given some of our listeners an easy joke there, looking at the dummies over there.
That's the first team to face Tottenham.
That looks pretty much like how they were set up for West Ham's opening goal at the weekend. United have got one game before the final next week, as everyone should be aware. If those of you who don't, Chelsea away Friday at 8:15, that unusual dreaded kick-off time, because there's a kick-off at 7:30, which is now Tottenham's game. So Tottenham won their battle to get it brought forward, and they didn't humiliate themselves by cocking it up against Bodo Glimt last week. They won that tie quite comfortably in the end. I mean, two on the face of it looked very one-sided ties. One was 7-1 on aggregate. Spurs won 5-1 on aggregate. I'm not looking for the Jack Wilshere reply, but what do you make of Tottenham?
Yeah, we were joking about that before, weren't we?
Yes.
I mean, what do you make of Tottenham? They've surprised me away in the Europa League, because I think we all view Postecoglou as fairly, not naive tactically, but just this refusal to compromise. And also just that famous Chelsea game last year and the whole, it's just who we are, mate, and all this sort of nonsense. But the way they won in Frankfurt was really impressive and a professional job. And then they conceded that goal last week. In the first leg to Bodo Glimt, and you thought that could be a real game changer. You know, we reeled off the teams last week that have lost even just this season at Bodo Glimt, and Tottenham got through it with the minimal of fuss. Really, they were never in danger. They obviously kept a clean sheet. They won 2-0. They never let Bodo Glimt get kind of a sniff of a comeback. And you have to say they've done a really professional job in the Europa League, and I think they've made more changes in the Premier League than United have. But yeah,
I was talking about wrapping them up in cotton wool on Monday, so I think it will probably be a shadow side for them.
Changed side
at Villa Park.
Yeah, and that, I mean, the fact they're making so many changes is probably good for United, because it means United will finish 16th rather than 17th. But yeah, I mean, like United, they're just, I say they're so hard to call, but maybe in a different kind of way from United, in that we're still early on in the Amorim era here. We can still kind of present those excuses of why it's not working in the Premier League. With Postecoglou, I think there's a view generally that it just isn't going to work. I think that's why everyone expects him to go, whether they win or lose. But I think the way they performed in the Europa League, certainly in the knockout stages, is kind of very on Postecoglou and on Tottenham-like. So, yeah, just a very hard team to call. But I've been impressed with the way they've got through these ties, really. They've not done anything particularly Spursy, have they?
No, bit of a curveball here, and I know it's not a question, but we all necessarily like to answer. What would your combined 11 of the two teams? Who gets in that?
Who gets in that? I mean, Tottenham have probably got, even though they don't play wing backs, they've probably got better wing backs than United, haven't they? In Porro and Udogie. Romero is an excellent centre half.
I think across the two squads, Van der Ven on his day.
Van der Ven actually is probably the best defender. I was thinking of the keeper. I mean, Vicario seems, it's probably not much in it goalkeeper wise. Vicario's very dodgy under crosses. You'd have to say Solanke as the striker, I guess, even I'm not entirely convinced about him.
But when the alternative is Højlund, you are.
The alternative is Højlund. It's got to be Solanke, hasn't it? I mean, it's a number 10. You'd want Ahmad, but I think I'd probably have Kulusevski over Maddison as a Tottenham player. Although you're kind of with two left footers then, I guess, aren't you? I'm not sure I'd have maybe Bentancur instead of Ugarte. But I don't think there's anyone in their midfield that I'd really want for those holding roles. Like Ugarte's not been massively convincing, has he yet? So maybe you'd go Bentancur, but I don't think there's much between it. I mean, I'd probably make an argument for a fairly even split there, I guess.
Which is impossible with 11 players.
Which is impossible, yes, that's a good point. Let's go 6-5 United. But in a way, it sums up.
Yeah.
It kind of sums up where we are with this system, that you'd probably pick Porro and Udogie as the wing backs, even though they play fullback for Tottenham.
Yeah. I think this is the other thing that comes into it. Just objectively assessing the squads, I genuinely think Spurs have probably got the edge on United in most areas, and that they've got better fullbacks, wing backs, whatever you want to call them. I'd say Vicario has probably been a better keeper since he came to England from Italy at the same time as Onana 2 years ago. Solanke is a better striker. United, of course, have got two match-winning attackers forwards in Ahmad and Bruno Fernandes. The midfield, it can be much for muchness, but Bissouma, Sarr, Bentancur, I think probably have got the edge on United's midfield as well. But then we come back to that famous Sir Alex Ferguson team talk of, lads, it's Tottenham.
Yeah.
And you think about Tottenham in a final setting, and all of a sudden you can just about understand if the bookmakers have United as slight favourites.
Yeah, you can. I mean, I always kind of find it hard to get my head around the idea of like a club having characteristics I mean, it's kind of what Conte touched on, isn't it, when he left Tottenham in that famous Southampton press conference when I think had they been 2-0 up and went 3-2 down and maybe drew 3-3 that day, and he obviously went on that rant of this is the culture of Tottenham. And we touched it on the podcast I did with Stephen the other week, saying like, United know how to win trophies and Tottenham don't, but it's like they're inanimate objects. Like, you don't like suddenly put on the Tottenham shirt and go, oh God, how do you win it? I can't remember how we win a trophy.
Yeah.
But I get the idea of it because they don't get over the line and they do lose cup finals. They lost the Champions League final. They're the best chance to win a league title. They kind of fell apart and didn't take it. And there is that history
for a 3-year period, they arguably had the best team in England in terms of a 1-11, where you knew it was going to be, without fail, Lloris, Alderweireld, Vertonghen, Walker. So maybe 2-year period, 3-year rather than 3-year period. Walker at right back, Rose at left back. It would have been Dembele and Dyer, Ali, Son, Eriksen, Kane. I mean, that's
a great team.
Exceptional side.
It's a great team.
Even those players together, they probably got to a final nobody can remember, which was the 2015 League Cup final in Pochettino's first season, where they weren't a threat. Nobody saw them as a credible force. That changed in the next 2 or 3 years. But that just goes to show, I suppose, why people think some people seem to think it's a foregone conclusion that United, because of their mentality, will turn up and they'll just turn it on next week, which I can understand, and it wouldn't be a surprise if that happened. But as I go back to that point, it's such a basic point. They are not playing a European side. And also, they have had a bit of the rub of the green, as you said. 3 red cards against them in each round during the knockouts. Is that going to run out at some point? But I just think that the dynamic of this final is so dicey and fascinating. And certainly for the Europa League level, I don't think there's ever been a final in my lifetime that comes near to it in terms of the amount of eyeballs that are going to be on Bilbao next week.
Yeah, I mean, totally. It's for a final. I don't really like finals where it's 2 teams from the same country. You kind of want the mix in Europe. You want something different. But on this occasion, I mean, the stakes are just so high, aren't they? The fact it's 2 teams who have underperformed so incredibly. It'd be different if United had finished 4th and Tottenham 6th. We wouldn't be talking about this final in the same way. We're talking about it in this way because the stakes are so high. And for whoever loses, it is their worst season in a generation, isn't it? You're at that point where
Spurs got relegated in 1977, which was 3 years after United got relegated in 74. So effectively for both
50 years,
the worst season
of
since relegation.
Yeah, and obviously winning the Europa League will won't entirely. I think the league campaign has been so disastrous they won't entirely gloss over it, but it finishes on a high. You've won a trophy, you're in the Champions League, and you can just kind of go, right, that was a disaster. Here's the mitigation. We've won this. It shows what we can do. Forget it ever happened. For the losers, you can't do that. No. It's going to be painful. The narrative is going to change totally for whoever loses. Judgment is kind of out on both at the moment, but whoever loses is going to get absolutely hammered, aren't they? Because it will be a disastrous season, like we say, the worst in 50 years. And I think that adds to the jeopardy much more than if this was 4th versus 6th, 5th versus 6th. If both had already qualified for Europe, the fact that it's 16th versus 17th, I think, makes it that higher stakes game and makes it kind of one of the most intriguing and probably tense finals for a long, long time, I think.
Yeah, well, the players are just starting some ball work now, playing 2-touch, some pitches nearby, and all of a sudden for taking a picture of us. Is that Darren Fletcher over there? He's just, some of the coaches are adjusting the sprinklers ahead of them, I think, training over here. It seems like they're still pretty much just limpering up with these games of 2-touch before they start their keep ball sessions. Hipsters call them rondos, but it's as far as I'm concerned, when I was playing it at PE, God knows how many years ago, it was keep ball. So they're about to come over here shortly. I think we'll leave it there because we'll obviously want to glean some detail from their proper training sessions now that the weights have gone away. But thank you very much again, Tyrone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Samuel.
We'll be doing this again from not necessarily from Bilbao next week, because we'll be staying in San Sebastian, as a lot of United fans will be next week, and they'll be scattered in San Sebastian at Santander, in Bilbao. Those of you who booked your refundable hotels at the start of the season, you did absolutely the right thing. Others have not learned that lesson, but I was speaking to a friend the other day. He actually said that he's booked his rechargeable hotel for Budapest next year for the Champions League final, which is extremely optimistic. But hopefully for United's sake, they can at least get in the Champions League, if not to the final. But thank you for listening. And please, if you haven't given us a like or a subscribe, please do so on the podcast platform of your choice. And we'll speak to you again very soon.